Good morning, Sault Ste. Marie, and welcome to another edition of ONNPoint. It's 11 o'clock. We're live on TV, live on Facebook. On today's edition, we talked to Al Arrington. He's a governance specialist, first of two shows, and we're going to talk about the U.S. impeachment and how political and parties and politics relates to governance. And we'll start that right after these messages.
This is On TV.
Whether you're part of a network of one-stop shops for young people to access mental, physical, and social services, of a network of friends who support someone who's hospitalized for a mental illness. When it comes to mental health, every action counts.
In your home, lighting is just as important as style.
With PowerView Motorization from Hunter Douglas, you can schedule your shades to light up the room. Create privacy, or both, automatically. No hands required.
So your shades will always be in the right place, at the right time, in style. And it's only from Hunter Douglas.
Imagine knowing about incidents, closures, and roadwork all before starting your trip. Ontario 511 lets you know before you go. You can get real-time information directly from the Ministry of Transportation, because the more you know, the easier it is for you to go. And spend the time doing the things that matter most.
Welcome back to ONNPoint. I'm Andy Martins. As mentioned, we're live on Facebook, live on TV. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Al Arrington. He's a governance specialist writing a book with my former broadcast colleague, Riley Smith. But we'll talk about that in 1 week. Al's here to talk about the U.S. impeachment and generally in countries how political parties are kind of not getting the governance piece right, and then they're not really as good as we want them to be. So welcome to ONNPoint, Al. It's great to have you here this morning.
Thank you very much, Andy. It's my pleasure.
Wonderful. My pleasure as well. Let's start with your background, Al, in terms of what you did for your job and how you came to this governance piece, writing a book about governance and getting into something really interesting and totally different.
Well, it's been quite a journey actually for me. I grew up in the tourism industry. I've been in tourism for over 40 years now. Part of that time, though, I spent as a president of Ontario's nature and outdoor tourism industry for 6 years. And when I became president of the organization, I had no clue what governance even was. I was fairly good at business, but didn't know what governance was. And there were some serious governance issues in our organization, and I had to, we were doing things the same old way was not working, so I started educating myself on governance, and I just became fascinated by it. I was very frustrated that there was so little information, basic information about fundamental governance. Right. So I started developing a lot of my own graphics and educational techniques and stuff like that. And I was encouraged to, at some point, put them into a book, and eventually Did one book, although actually this was not the book I was really anticipating, but along with everybody else, I'm very frustrated with how dysfunctional our government and other governments are, and the governance considerations that I've developed over the years gave me an insight that most people unfortunately don't have, and that's what I'd like to pass on to people is what good governance is and why it's so important to pay attention, and because otherwise we have what we have in government, which is a lot of dysfunction, some corruption, and in Canada's not that bad, but when you look at other countries of the world where it's actually a lot worse.
Right, let's get into the impeachment thing. Everybody knows, or most people are following this, of Donald Trump. And just to remind the viewers, Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton are the only other presidents. Well, Richard Nixon resigned. He probably would have been the only one to get impeached, but he resigned on August of 1974. But neither Andrew Johnson or Bill Clinton were impeached or removed from office because the Senate has the final say in the process. Now, you're a real smart guy, Al. We were talking before the broadcast. You're saying that the people of the United States are being ignored in the process. Tell me more about that.
Yes, actually, I mean, this whole thing with the impeachment, politics in general, in the United States, in Canada, in most governments of the world where there are political parties, is that it's a battle. It's a political battle in the United States between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and they're all both fighting for control over the government, because having control of government is extremely lucrative.
Right. Lobbying, and we were saying that the political parties are lobbyists, and so they have additional lobby groups in Washington as well.
Yes, and that's what it's all about. And that's essentially what political parties are, is lobby organizations, but the difference is, instead of influencing politicians, they actually have control of politicians. And this really doesn't make sense from a legal point, because I know if you were to threaten or bribe or threaten a politician, I'm pretty sure, Andy, that you would probably end up in jail.
That's right.
Yet the political parties do that all the time. It's part of how they do that. That's how they control the politicians so that they can control the government. And that's what the battle is between in the United States right now. It's a really pitched battle between the Democrats and the Republicans over who is in control of government. And it's never a battle that either one wins for any long period of time. The big losers, however, are the people of the United States, because their needs are actually being lost in this battle.
We're saying that the process is flawed, the people are being ignored. We talked also about the Constitution being flawed, and the founding fathers really not getting it totally right. Do you think we're seeing that process playing out, how the process has been flawed over the last X number of years? We're seeing the flaw coming out more now than we ever have.
Well, the United States and their how they approached the Constitution was very, very interesting, because they really wanted to avoid what is happening right now. Actually, the founding fathers of the United States tried to write the Constitution so there would not be room for political factions and political parties. There were so many issues in Britain at the time, and it was the reason why the United States really had a revolution and separated from Britain. It wasn't that they wanted to, because they were all British citizens at the time. So rebelling and setting up their own country was in a lot of ways intimidating. But it was the political factions in Britain were so abusive and at the time and manipulative that they really felt that we were better off on our own.
Right.
And so they set up their own country, but they really didn't have much for governance models at the time. What they had were monarchies, essentially, some small republics and stuff like that, but they really didn't have any good governance models. All they knew were there were some really bad governance models they wanted to avoid. such as having a monarchy, and hopefully not having political parties. And but they creeped in anyways. By the time George Washington finished his 2 terms as president of the United States and stepped down, even in his farewell address, he was warning that the burgeoning political parties were going to be a threat, and that the American people really needed to be aware of this threat, or else it would derail the government in regard to serving the people of the United States.
You bring up a good point, Al. Too many political parties. We see that in Italy. We see that in, Israel, where it really messes things up. And the people are confused, and you have too many elections. So the founding fathers had a good point there, that they just wanted a model that would work, but it's kind of diluted over the years.
Yeah, it has. I mean, the problem is actually the political parties are not in our Constitution and their Constitution. The problem that they have is that political parties have set their own rules. Right. It's not about accountability or making sure that the government serves its people. It's really become more of, how can we control government so that we can stay in control of government, so that we can do what we need to stay in control of government. So it's a vicious cycle of self-perpetuating politics, and getting out of it is it really is coming back to a focus of making sure that the government is actually a servant of its people, which the United States really tried to do. Actually, it's fascinating. The United States and what they tried to do when they became a country is really fascinating, because they really tried to avoid a lot of the bad political hazards that we're facing, and unfortunately, the Constitution is not a perfect document. There was a lot of controversy in the Founding Fathers, even when it was drafted. Right. But it wasn't a perfect document. It's held up as a perfect document, but it's not actually. It was a set of processes that they were hoping would result in a government that was really more of a servant of its people than of political elites.
Remind everybody to be impeached. There are treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors. Now, Al, in terms of, do you think political governance has a piece to play here? Because I keep hearing time and time people are debating whether the current articles of impeachment with Donald Trump meet the impeachment level of what the Founding Fathers intended it to be. Political governance, has this diluted the process here?
I think it has nothing to do with I think this has nothing to do with that, actually. It has everything to do with control of government. It's not a fight over doing what's right. It's a fight over who's going to be in control over the next period of time. That's all it is.
We'll touch on that, Al, but stay right there. We'll take a couple of commercial breaks, and we'll be right back with On Point. Welcome back to On Point. I'm Andy Martins, live on Facebook, live on TV, and we're chatting with Al Arrington. He's a specialist in governance. He has a book that's out with co-written with Riley Smith, and we're here to talk about the U.S. impeachment and to show you examples in Canada and the UK also where good governance, political governance is kind of diluting the system. Before the break, Al, we were talking about political control being more the issue of this impeachment of Donald Trump. And I wanted you to comment further how this is a battle to control the election cycle that's coming in about 9 months in November of 2020. And they're really going to big extremes to make this control and make this noise happen.
Well, that's what the game is all about, eh? It's about how you can manipulate. I mean, you look at even the impeachment, what's happening with the impeachment and trial. Mitch McConnell has already said that basically the trial itself is not going to go against the president, which to me is actually a violation of his oath of office. At the same time, you see both sides are just playing to the camera. The actual trial itself is irrelevant because they're just looking to see how they can win other elections, whether it's for Congress, Senate, or the presidency, because whichever party gets the most control over that can exploit as much as they can of the U.S. culture and economy for as long as they can, and including the people who are behind the parties themselves.
Having said that, Al, is this no coincidence that this timing, the Nancy Pelosi in the House of Representatives rushed through her piece of it. They didn't allow the Republicans any witnesses, and now it's in the Senate. Is that no accident, Al, that the timing is the way they are? Because the U.S. process starts next week with the Iowa caucuses on Monday, and the timing is there, I think deliberately was set to be the way it is.
It's all political, actually. It has nothing to do with guilt or innocence. It's all about political manipulation, election manipulation, and unfortunately media manipulation as well, because for media, politics is essentially a blood sport, and when you look at Trump himself, I mean, the media, all the media, really made him. They reported every crazy thing he said.
They've been really at him since the day he got inaugurated in January of 2017. You know, people coming out like Maxine Waters, and then the Mueller inquiry. This guy has had, from start to up until now, he's had always problems. And again, many say that this is just because certain few were not happy with the election results in 2016.
Of course, actually. I mean, some Republicans aren't happy with the election results. They had their own favorites within their party that they would rather have had there than Trump, because Trump is less of a party supporter than he's a Trump supporter, not a party supporter. So the Republican Party itself doesn't like that. So it's all about politics. It's all about playing to different constituencies, seeing if you can manipulate different constituencies. And the Republican Party knows that Trump has got a very strong hold on certain constituencies in the United States, including there's a fairly high population of what I would say are religious extremists in the United States that are very, very supportive of Trump, no matter what. And the Republican Party knows that, so they will stick with him as long as he can deliver that office. So,
right. That's why you're right. The congressmen and senators have to be very careful the way they vote now, because this could reflect on the congressmen and women and senators that are up for election in 2020. Not all of them are. Some aren't till 2022. But if they vote the wrong way or be swayed by the political governance, it might cost them later on this year in November.
Oh, for sure. Actually, that's what it is all about. It's all about winning these elections. And if Trump can keep delivering his base, the Republicans, politicians will keep supporting him.
Right.
They don't necessarily like him, but they will keep supporting him as long as he can deliver votes for that give them more control over Congress and the Senate. At the same time, the Democrats feel the same way. They see his base as something that they can't that is going to jeopardize their ability to get control of Senate, the House, and the presidency. So, and neither of them really, to me, care that much about making sure that the government of the United States serves the people of the United States. It's all about control of government to serve their parties.
Yes, exactly. And TheHill.com was reporting last month that actually the Trump impeachment is a blueprint to overthrow the government from inside. And it's a very dangerous tool when you follow the political governance here the way they are.
Well, unfortunately, the playbook is led to Nazi Germany, and that's how bad government governance can get. Nazi Germany bad. And Hitler was able to hijack the government of Germany, which at the time had some of the best military minds and stuff in the world. Hitler himself was not a particularly brilliant man, actually. He just got into a position of control over a government that had a long military history, had some of the best military minds in the world. And the Nazis really didn't start losing until Hitler actually took more control over the military and started to kill off those brilliant military minds when they didn't agree with him.
That's right, exactly. And it really is a dangerous tool to go down that road. Let's talk quickly about our politics in Canada. In Ontario, we talked about before the show that Doug Ford is currently premier, but there was a point system, the government controlled point system, the PC party. Vic Fideli was there, Patrick Brown was taken out. This could be another Canadian example where the voters, what the people feel don't matter, simply like we see in the States. It's an internal battle. The vote, the fact that Trump was elected in 2016, that's secondary. That doesn't matter to the politicians anymore.
No, it's all about the party, actually, and same thing with Doug Ford. Doug Ford delivers a base constituency. That base constituency has a lot of control over the party itself, and I don't think political parties should be dictating who is who are our political representatives, who is managing our government, because it really the government of Ontario in this case, or the government of Canada. The government of Canada should belong to the people of Canada. It should be serving our needs, not the political needs of the parties. And yet that's what it keeps coming down to more and more as the political parties get more and more control over the politicians.
Right.
Which is actually the parties are actually much more advanced in Canada because they actually have legal control over the politicians in regard to candidates and stuff like that, much more so than the United States at this point. Even though the United States in some ways looks worse, the Constitution of the United States actually has protected them a bit more than our Constitution here in Canada from the machinations of political parties.
Exactly. Everybody's focused, the Trump won and the election results of 2016, but they don't stop to think that people didn't want Hillary Clinton. She was a flawed candidate, and nobody talks about that. It's just a constant hatred of the guy that was elected by the people.
And that's the case, actually. I mean, to me, it's probably fairly debatable whether Trump was the worst choice in the United States election. We just went through a federal election ourselves here in Canada, which was, to me, was just awful in regard to our choices.
That's right.
And we were just, the choices were being imposed by the political parties. And when you look at Canada, I mean, this wasn't that many decades ago that the political parties weren't even on the ballots. You were actually voting for local representatives, and then the parties get on. So you started voting for parties, and now we're actually voting for the actual prime minister, which is kind of crazy, actually.
It is,
because the political parties have controlled it to such an extent that we don't have we have very limited choice anymore, and the choices are getting worse. And the government is really not focused on serving us. The government is focused on the needs of whichever political party or parties are in control of it at the time to try to make sure that they get back in again.
Al, our time is up. Can you believe it? It was a great show, and Al will be back next week to talk about his book. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in a week.
Thanks very much, Andy. It's a pleasure. I love talking governance, whether it's political governance or organizational governance. So I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Great. We'll see you in a week. I'll be back to wrap up the show right after these commercial messages.
In your home, lighting is just as important as style.
With PowerView Motorization from Hunter Douglas, you can schedule your shades to light up the room, create privacy, or both, automatically. No hands required.
So your shades will always be in the right place at the right time in style. And it's only from Hunter Douglas.
Angelo, it's me, Vito. Imbecile, your brother. Listen, you bring 10 gallons of flat eggshell or white paint.
This past year, we've been celebrating our 65th anniversary, dating back to services originating in our community in 1954, which is quite some time ago. It's been a great opportunity this past year to recognize the pioneers, the stakeholders that worked tirelessly to create what we are today. I'm grateful for everything that the families 65 years ago and the people that assembled the organization have done in order for us to achieve the success that we're experiencing 65 years later.
This is On TV.
Welcome back to On Point. We hope you enjoyed Al Harrington on that little talk about governance and its U.S. impeachment. Monday, Mike Delfrey is here, and Al is back a week from today. I'm Andy Martins for On Point. Have a great week.